What do you think about the rumors of Tank and Jake fight?
Man, Tank disrespectful to the sport if he choose that over fighting with me. I'm the best fighter in the sport. I've been telling him that. And he called cap on it. So if he won't call cap and say I'm not who I say I am.
Jake is big. Tank has a lot of skill, but I don't think he's the same Tank that we saw the most incredible knockout.
Always been the plan for Jake to fight Tank once Canelo didn't happen.
The boxing world is buzzing with breaking news that has sent shockwaves across fans, analysts, and fighters alike. Gervonta Tank Davis, one of the most electrifying knockout artists of this generation, is now officially set to step into the ring against Jake Paul this November. Yes, you heard that right. The YouTuber turned boxer, who has been steadily building his reputation, is now facing one of boxing pound-for-pound stars. This is not just another exhibition announcement. It is a cultural moment that demands attention. Already, opinions are flooding in from fighters, promoters, trainers, and influencers, each with their own perspective on what this clash means for boxing. Some call it a joke, others call it disrespectful, while many see it as a dangerous gamble. But beyond all the noise, one theme keeps emerging. Everyone is underestimating Jake Paul. Before we dive deep into all the explosive reactions from across the boxing community, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Jake Paul has any chance of shocking the world, or is Tank Davis about to deliver a brutal reality check? Let's break down the reaction step by step and unpack what this fight truly represents. The announcement itself is monumental. When the words first dropped, Gervonta Davis versus Jake Paul set to fight in November, the boxing landscape instantly shifted. This is not just news about a fight. It is news about the evolution of boxing itself. The idea that a social media influencer who transitioned into boxing only a few years ago is now facing one of the most feared knockout punchers in the sport highlights how much the lines between entertainment and pure sport have blurred. For the old guard of boxing, this news is almost sacrilegious. They see Tank as an elite world champion, someone who should be chasing legacy-defining fights, not participating in what they would label as a sideshow. But for the newer generation of fans, this is a dream. The crossover appeal of Jake Paul is undeniable. He has brought millions of fresh eyes to boxing, and now he is daring to challenge someone from the very top tier. The breaking news headline is not just about two fighters agreeing to an exhibition. It is about boxing itself being redefined before our very eyes. This announcement set the stage for every subsequent reaction, because from this point forward, the legitimacy of the sport and the legitimacy of Jake Paul will both be tested on the grandest of stages. Mike Perry, a fighter who knows the grind and brutality of combat sports, gave a nuanced take. He acknowledged that Jake Paul has size on his side, but he also questioned whether Gervonta Davis is the same devastating knockout machine we once saw delivering highlight reel finishes. Perry brought up Lamont Roach's performance against Tank, pointing out that even elite champions can have off nights and vulnerable moments. His words hint at something deeper. The aura of invincibility around Tank may be fading. On the other hand, Nakisa Bidarian, Jake's business partner and strategic mind, reminded everyone that Jake's size has always been the elephant in the room. For years, fans laughed off the idea that Jake could even step into the same ring as Tank, often saying Tank would kill him. Yet now, with the fight official, those same critics are shifting their narrative to focus on the size disparity. This shift exposes a truth. Much of the hate toward Jake comes from preconceived notions rather than a fair assessment of his skill. Perry's recognition that Tank might not be the same fighter he once was, combined with Nakisa's reminder that Jake's size advantage cannot be ignored, creates the perfect storm of intrigue. The message here is clear: dismiss Jake Paul at your own risk.
Jake is big. Tank has a lot of skill, but I don't think he's the same Tank that we saw the most incredible knockouts. We saw him, Lamont Roach performed great. They went to draw.
Matters, Jake is big, and for so long it's been Tank would kill Jake Paul.
Mike Perry doubled down by questioning Tank Davis's motivation and hunger for the sport. He wondered openly whether Tank truly loves boxing enough anymore to overcome an opponent who outweighs him by nearly 80 to 100 pounds. That statement hits at the core of what makes combat sports unpredictable. Talent and skill can only carry a fighter so far if the desire is not there. History has shown countless times that fighters who lose their passion often get exposed, even against less skilled but more motivated opponents. Perry's analysis forces us to ask, is Is Tank Davis fighting Jake Paul because he sees it as a challenge, or is he doing it for the paycheck? If it is the latter, then the size difference becomes even more dangerous. A fully focused Tank may indeed dismantle Jake with speed, skill, and timing, but a Tank who is half-hearted, going through the motion, could find himself overwhelmed by the physical presence of a naturally much larger man. Perry is not just commenting on the fight, he is exposing the human side of boxing. Fighters are not machines. Their motivation, discipline, and hunger play just as big a role as their skill set. If Tank has lost even a fraction of his fire, Jake Paul becomes a far more legitimate threat than anyone wants to admit.
You know, I just don't know. And Tank walked away. I don't know if he loves it enough to beat a guy who outweighs him by 80 to 100 pounds.
Then came Shakur Stevenson's fiery reaction. When asked about the rumors of Tank fighting Jake Paul, Stevenson did not mince words. He called it disrespectful to the sport itself, arguing that Tank should be fighting him instead. For Shakur, one of boxing's most technically gifted fighters today, the idea that Tank would choose Jake Paul over a legitimate world-class bout is an insult to everything boxing is supposed to stand for. His anger is not just about being overlooked, it is about what this fight symbolized. To Shakur, this is Tank abandoning the pursuit of greatness in favor of a spectacle. And in many ways, his frustration echoes what hardcore boxing fans feel. They believe Tank should be cementing his legacy by fighting other champions, not risking his credibility against a YouTuber. Yet, Shakur's passionate stance also highlights another dynamic: jealousy and business reality. He knows that Jake Paul brings numbers, attention, and money that even elite fighters like himself cannot generate. So while he is justified in calling the fight disrespectful, his anger also betrays a frustration with the system itself. Shakur won the big fights, the spotlight, and the payday, but Tank chasing Jake proves that in today's boxing world, business sometimes trumps legacy. This tension is exactly why reactions to this fight are so explosive. It is about more than just two men in the ring. It is about the identity of boxing in 2025.
What do you think about the rumors of Tank and Jake fight?
Man, Tank disrespectful to the sport if he choose that over fighting with me.
When Shakur Stevenson declares that he is the best fighter in the sport, he is not just talking about himself. He is setting the standard of what greatness is supposed to look like in boxing. This statement has direct implications for a potential Tank Davis versus Jake Paul showdown, because it puts into perspective what best really means. In this sport, best is not about YouTube views, Instagram followers, or clever marketing campaigns. It is about skill, dominance, and proven excellence against the elite of the elite. Shakur Stevenson is a technician who has fought world champions, outclassed them, and made the sweet science look effortless. When he says he is the best, he is demanding respect from his peers. Now contrast that with Jake Paul, a man who built his name outside the sport and has been forcing his way into boxing's highest conversations through spectacle and controversy. Tank Davis exists right in the middle of this conversation, because Tank is undeniably one of the pound-for-pound hardest hitters in boxing, a man who has proven himself under the bright lights. So when Shakur says, "I'm the best in the sport," and Jake calls cap on it, we must look deeper. Jake Paul, in many ways, is dismissive of the foundation of boxing. He mocks the hierarchy, he bypasses the grind. For him to call cap on a statement like Shakur shows how detached he is from the true levels of this sport. Tank Davis would never call cap on Shakur being the best, because Tank himself understands how rare greatness is. Real fighters recognize real fighters, but Jake Paul has not earned that credibility. His path has been different. He has fought names like Tyron Woodley and Anderson Silva, legends in their own right, but not boxers who built legacies in the ring. That is why this Tank Davis versus Jake Paul fight is so fascinating. It is a clash between the authentic and the artificial, the proven and the unproven. What Shakur's quote highlights is a reminder that boxing has a very clear structure when it comes to greatness. If Jake Paul believes that calling cap on someone like Shakur is valid, then he must also believe that someone like Tank Davis is beatable simply because he himself believes in his own narrative. But that belief will be his downfall. Tank Davis has one-punch knockout power that Shakur Stevenson himself respects. Shakur knows that even though he is more of a pure boxer, Tank's presence in the sport is not to be disrespected. Jake Paul does not have that same reverence. His confidence borders on arrogance, and that is why stepping into the ring with Tank is dangerous beyond measure. In many ways, Shakur's quote is the perfect setup for the Tank versus Jake conversation. Shakur is calling for accountability. He is saying, if you are going to disrespect me, back it up in the ring. That same principle applies to Jake Paul. If he is going to dismiss the greats, if he is going to call cap on legitimate with fighters? Then he has to face someone like Tank Davis to prove that his words mean something. But unlike Shakur, Tank has no patience for narratives or storyline. Tank is pure destruction. He ends fights with brutality, and he does not care about debates. If Jake Paul steps in with Tank the way he has been dismissive with Shakur, he will find out the hard way what boxing is really about. Shakur's words resonate because they are true. He is one of the best. Tank Davis is also one of the best. And Jake Paul? He is walking into a world where words mean nothing once the first punch lands.
I'm the best fighter in the sport. I've been telling him that. He called cap on it. So if you gonna call cap and say I'm not who I say I am, come prove.
Jake Paul is not wrong when he says boxers don't like boxing sometimes. Many elite fighters have avoided fights, ducked challenges, and played the business side of the sport more than the competitive side. But what Jake fails to realize is that Tank Davis is not one of those fighters. Tank has proven time and again that he will sign the dotted line against dangerous opponents. He fought Leo Santa Cruz when people thought it was too early. He fought Ryan Garcia on the biggest stage when most thought Ryan was too risky. Tank is the opposite of what Jake described. So when Jake says boxers don't like boxing, he might be pointing at Shakur, at Devin Haney, at fighters who strategize their careers differently. But he cannot apply that to Tank Davis. Tank lives for this. Tank craves the violence. Tank's career is a resume of men who thought they could beat him, but ended up on the canvas staring at the ceiling. This narrative from Jake is part of his psychological warfare. He wants to position himself as the outsider who is more willing to fight than the insider. It makes him look brave. It makes him look different. But this is where Tank Davis flips the script. Tank is not about contract or politics. He is about legacy. He is about proving himself in the ring. And that is what separates him from every name Jake has thrown around. Jake likes to claim that fighters are scared of him. That may have been true for some. Maybe some boxers do not want to risk losing to a YouTuber. But Tank Davis is built differently. He would relish the opportunity to dismantle Jake Paul in front of the entire world because he knows the impact it would have. It would be a massacre, and Tank would be proud to deliver it. This quote also reveals Jake Paul's frustration. He has been begging for legitimacy. He has been chasing big names because he knows he cannot build a true boxing resume. He cannot climb the ranks like a real fighter. He needs spectacle. He needs crossover stars. But Tank Davis is not a spectacle. Tank is a real fighter who has already earned his place. That is why this potential matchup feels so dangerous. Jake is playing with fire when he puts himself in the same breath as men like Tank. Tank is not ducking. Tank is not scared. Tank would fight Jake tomorrow if the money was right. And once that bell rings, Jake Paul will realize that Tank is not like the hesitant fighters he accused. Tank is a predator, and predators do not negotiate with prey. They devour them.
Listen names, man, but it's funny, like, I've said this before in boxing, and boxers don't like boxing. They don't want to sign the contract. So we'll see what happens.
Jake Paul talks about staying in the gym, about training and preparation. That is admirable. Every fighter needs discipline. Every fighter needs consistency. But training alone does not bridge the gap between Jake Paul and a fighter like Tank Davis. No matter how many hours Jake spends in the gym, he cannot manufacture the instincts Tank was born with. Tank has been fighting since he was a child, raised in the trenches of Baltimore, molded by a system where boxing was survival. Jake Paul found boxing after fame. Tank Davis found fame because of boxing. That is the difference. Training matters, but it is not everything. When Jake Paul talks about discipline, he underestimates the fact that Tank's discipline has already been proven under pressure, under fire, against men who were built for this sport. Shakur's words about Lamont only amplify this point. Shakur is saying that certain fights are too dangerous, even for skilled men. If Shakur believes Lamont is too dangerous for Jake, then what does that say about Tank Davis? If Lamont is dangerous, Tank is deadly. Tank is the definition of danger in the ring. He does not just beat opponents, he breaks them. He ruins their confidence. He ends their careers. Jake Paul may train hard, but training does not erase the danger that Tank represents. If Jake struggles with the idea of fighting someone like Lamont, then Tank Davis is a nightmare he cannot wake up from. This is the essence of the Tank Davis versus Jake Paul fight. Jake Paul can train as much as he wants, but he is stepping into a lion's den. Shakur Stevenson recognizes danger when he sees it, and his words are a warning not just to Jake, but to everyone watching. You cannot fake your way into greatness. You cannot Instagram your way into being ready for Tank Davis. You have to live this life, and Jake has not lived it long enough. Tank Davis will show him the difference between training and true mastery. Jake Paul's gym hours will not save him when Tank lands that first uppercut. They will not save him when Tank cuts off the ring and closes in like a predator. Training builds muscle, but Tank Davis destroys spirits. That is the reality Jake Paul will face if he steps into the ring.
At the end of the day, I'm just going to keep on training and staying in the gym.
It's dangerous for him to go back in there and fight Lamont. I think Lamont is a hell of a fighter.
KSI's words cut deep because they expose the pattern everyone has seen with Jake Paul, but few have been bold enough to say so plainly. KSI is not simply accusing Jake of ducking him. He is pointing to a documented history of avoidance that has defined Jake Paul's boxing career since he entered the sport. Jake Paul has made millions building his brand, but the foundation of that brand has always been selective matchmaking, avoiding risks, and finding opponents who give him leverage rather than challenge him at the core of what he is supposed to be, a boxer. KSI makes it clear that he has been chasing Jake for years, and instead of stepping into the ring with someone who has been on his level, who has a fan base equal to his, and who represents the fight the people truly want, Jake has done everything possible to push that moment further away. And now, rather than facing that accountability, rather than proving himself against the rival who has been in his face for years, Jake Paul wants to fight Gervonta Tank Davis. The hypocrisy here is staggering. Tank Davis is not from the YouTube world. Tank Davis is not a crossover figure from entertainment or social media. Tank Davis is a generational talent, a world champion with frightening knockout power, and someone who has carved his reputation inside the unforgiving world of professional boxing. For Jake to skip over the fight the fans demand, the fight that would validate his years of trash talk against KSI, and suddenly start calling out Tank Davis, feels less like bravery and more like theater. KSI's frustration comes from the fact that Jake is once again shifting the narrative. Instead of giving closure to their rivalry, Jake is hunting clout by targeting an established legend. That is not the move of a fighter who wants to earn respect. It is the move of a fighter who wants to hijack headlines without having earned the right to be there. When KSI says Jake has been making excuse after excuse, it is not a hollow claim. The timeline speaks for itself. Whenever fight negotiations came close, Jake shifted demands, moved dates, or claimed KSI was not serious. Whenever KSI pressed the issue, Jake suddenly had another name on his list: a retired MMA fighter, an aging boxer, or someone smaller. The excuses were endless, and the pattern was clear. It was never about testing himself against KSI. It was about controlling the narrative and handpicking a path that always gave Jake the advantage. And now, with Tank Davis being thrown into the mix, it reeks of the same manipulation. Jake wants to choose his battles on his terms, but boxing does not respect shortcuts. You cannot run from accountability forever, and you cannot demand greatness without proving it against the people who have been chasing you from day one. KSI's anger resonates because he represents the audience in this drama. Fans see what Jake is doing. They see the running, they see the dodging, and they see the excuses. And the idea of Jake skipping KSI entirely to fight Tank is insulting to everyone who has been invested in this saga from the beginning. KSI's message is not just personal, it is universal. Jake has been ducking real challenges and spinning narratives to disguise it. But sooner or later, the truth breaks through. And if he truly dares to step into the ring with Tank Davis, it will not be excuses or social media spin that saves him. It will be his fists, his chin, and his heart. And history suggests Jake has not shown enough of any of those to survive a fighter like Tank.
I mean, look, with Jake, the guy's been ducking me or running away from me for so long, man. Like, he's just making excuse after excuse, and now he's fine.
This quote from KSI is more than just trash talk. It is a thesis statement for Jake Paul's entire boxing career. From day one, Jake has built his reputation not on taking the toughest fights, but on finding the ones that give him leverage. He wants bigger size, more reach, less experience, or an opponent who is far past their prime. That is the recipe that has defined him, and KSI exposes it perfectly. Whenever there is a fight that feels fair, that feels competitive, Jake Paul finds a way to avoid it. He craves the image of a fighter without embracing the reality of fighting as an equal. And this is why KSI's words sting, because they are undeniable. Let us examine the track record. Jake Paul fought Nate Robinson, an NBA player with zero boxing experience. He fought Ben Askren, a wrestler whose striking was mocked even in MMA. He fought Tyron Woodley, a former UFC champion, but one whose prime had ended years before, and whose knockout power had faded. Then he fought Anderson Silva, a 47-year-old legend, beloved but far removed from his prime. Every fight followed the same formula: an opponent with a name, with clout, but with built-in disadvantages that tilted the odds in Jake's favor. This is not the behavior of a man chasing greatness. It is the strategy of a businessman masquerading as a warrior. KSI is right to call it out, because the hypocrisy reaches its peak when Jake Paul tries to demand respect as a real fighter. Real fighters do not run from competition. Real fighters do not look for advantages at every turn. Real fighters embrace challenges even when the the odds are stacked against him. Tank Davis has fought killers. He has faced punchers, slick boxers, and pressure fighters. He has never asked for a shortcut because greatness cannot be manufactured. Jake Paul, however, has tried to build greatness on a foundation of loopholes, and KSI is exposing the cracks in that structure. When KSI says Jake runs away from anything that could be a decent fight, he is pointing directly at the fights the fans actually wanted. A fight with KSI would be even. A fight with Tommy Fury proved that point. Jake lost when faced with someone his age, his size, and with real boxing training. The moment the playing field was level, Jake Paul's mystique collapsed. And now, rather than going back to prove himself against Fury again, or settling his rivalry with KSI, Jake wants to leapfrog into a fight with Tank Davis. It is transparent. Jake is not hunting challenges. He is hunting headlines. He is hoping that even in defeat, the size narrative protects him. He can say, Tank was too small, and escape accountability. KSI's frustration is the frustration of boxing purists. Boxing is built on risk and reward, not on advantage and manipulation. If Jake Paul truly wants to be respected, he must step into a fight without leverage, without excuses, and without guarantee. Until then, KSI's words will define him, a man who only fights with advantage and runs from anything close.
I mean, it just says the type of guy Jake Paul is. He only fights someone if he has a major advantage. Anything that's close, or anything that could actually be a decent fight.
This section highlights the real intrigue in Tank Davis versus Jake Paul, the unknown. Shakur Stevenson, one of the brightest young stars in boxing, warns Tank Davis that this fight could go wrong if he is not sharp. That is not a dismissal of Tank's greatness, but it is an acknowledgement of the reality of boxing. When size differences come into play, the margins shrink. Stevenson sees the risk, and his words are both a warning and a reminder. Tank is elite, but Jake Paul is not a joke physically. He is bigger, heavier, and stronger than anyone Tank has faced. That alone makes this fight dangerous. Mike Perry adds another layer, suggesting that while Tank has the skill, he may not be the same Tank when faced with a man Jake's size. This is the essence of the intrigue. Can Tank's brilliance, his timing, his power, and his experience overcome the physical wall that Jake Paul represents? Or does size turn this spectacle into something real? Perry is not dismissing Tank's ability. He is questioning how ability translates when the weight classes are so far apart. In combat sport, physics matter, and Perry is highlighting the one thing that Jake Paul has always had in his back pocket: size. This does not mean Jake Paul is favored. Skill gap that wide often makes size irrelevant. But the fact that credible voices like Stevenson and Perry see the danger proves that this is not pure theater. Tank Davis must be perfect, because one mistake against a bigger man can erase years of dominance. The danger is real, and that is why this fight, despite all the criticism, has captured attention.
I can see that going left, so he better be on his A game.
Jake is big. Tank has a lot of skill, but I don't think he's the same Tank.
Jake Paul's own words reveal both his ambition and his delusion. He says he is down to fight Tank Davis. He says let's run it. But then he undercuts his own pitch by questioning whether Tank even needs him and whether there should be a height limit in boxing. This is classic Jake Paul, selling the fight with one hand while building his excuse with the other. By acknowledging the height difference, Jake is already planting the seed for his safety net. If he loses, he can say it was because of the weight and size difference. If he wins, he can claim the victory as the ultimate upset. Either way, he controls the narrative. But this is where Jake exposes himself. Boxing does not have height limits. Boxing has weight classes, and Tank Davis has been dominant within his. If Jake Paul truly wants to test himself, he must enter Tank's world, not distort it. Jake's words reveal that deep down, he knows this fight is not about respect or legacy. It is about spectacle. It is about attaching his name to Tank and using the spotlight to stay relevant. The irony is that Jake Paul is asking the wrong question. It is not about whether Tank needs him. It is about whether Jake Paul can survive Tank Davis's left hand. That is the only question that matters, and all the talk in the world will not change the answer once they step into the ring.
I'll be down. Let's run it. Like, I'll be super down.
I don't know if Gervonta needs Jake Paul. Let's be clear, right?
Is there a height limit in boxing?
When Mike Perry brought up Jake Paul's decision to fight Tank Davis, he didn't hold back, pointing out the obvious elephant in the room. Jake Paul has around 100 pounds on Tank Davis. That fact alone has set the boxing world on fire, with people questioning whether this fight should even happen. A weight discrepancy of that magnitude is no small matter. In boxing, 10 pounds can change the entire dynamic of a fight. When you start talking about 70, 80, or 100 pounds, you are walking into territory where logic and fairness awareness become blurred. Tank Davis has built his entire career dominating opponents in his natural division. He is a lightweight powerhouse, a man whose knockout power has humbled every name he has faced at 135 pounds. But when you throw him into the ring with someone like Jake Paul, a man who fights around cruiserweight, the optics shift drastically. On paper, Jake Paul looks like a giant compared to Tank. His reach, his frame, and his natural size should give him every advantage. Perry was simply saying what many others were already thinking. How can a man nearly 100 pounds lighter overcome such a gap? Yet, here is where the intrigue of this fight explodes. Boxing has always thrived on storylines that bend reality. Mike Tyson was constantly smaller than the men he destroyed, yet he used his ferocity and technique to rip giants apart. Tank Davis may not have Jake's size, but he has something far more valuable. He has elite skill. He has a killer instinct. He has the ability to land one perfectly timed shot that erases every weight advantage Jake Paul might bring into the ring. Perry's comment about the large weight discrepancy is important because it sets the stage for what fans must grapple with. Will this fight be about skill, or will it be about size? Tank is going in there to prove that greatness is not measured on a scale. Jake, on the other hand, will attempt to prove that his size, power, and newfound discipline can overwhelm a smaller, yet vastly superior technician. This is not just a clash of fighters, it is a clash of philosophies. Perry unintentionally highlighted the heart of the debate. When weight and skill collide, which one wins? That question alone makes this fight impossible to ignore.
Your buddy Jake just signed on to fight Tank Davis. What do you think of that fight? He's got like 100 pounds on him.
Yeah, you know, and they say that there's a large weight discrepancy.
Nakisa by Darian, Jake Paul's business partner and the architect behind many of his fight decisions, finally laid it out. He explained that this matchup with Tank Davis has always been part of the plan. Once a fight with Canelo Alvarez failed to materialize, Tank Davis became the obvious next move. According to Nakisa, this fight is not a gimmick. It's not random matchmaking. This is a fight years in the making, with Tank Davis calling Jake out for over 3 years. That is where the intrigue skyrockets, because Tank was not some reluctant opponent dragged into a payday. He wanted this. He demanded this. He saw Jake Paul rising in popularity, using boxing as a stage, and Tank decided he would be the one to silence him. People often criticize Jake for fighting men who were not truly eager to face him, but this is different. Tank Davis wants Jake, and that changes everything. Nakisa also pointed out something that exposes the hypocrisy of many boxing fans. For years, people mocked Jake Paul for being too big, saying he only fought undersized MMA fighters or boxers not in his league. But now, when Jake is matched with someone smaller in Tank Davis, suddenly everyone screams that size matters. This contradiction is what fuels Jake's narrative. If Jake wins, he proves he is not just bullying smaller opponents, but taking on the most dangerous little man in boxing history. If Tank wins, he proves that size is irrelevant when faced with greatness. Nakisa was not just hyping a fight, he was dismantling excuses before they could be made. He made it clear that this fight is intentional, not accidental, and it is meant to answer all of the lingering questions about Jake Paul's legitimacy. Fans wanted him to fight a real boxer. Well, there is no realer boxer than Gervonta, Tank Davis. Fans wanted him to face someone with a reputation. Tank has that in spades. Fans wanted him to face danger. Tank brings danger every time he steps through the rope. Nakisa's statement made one thing very clear. This fight is not just a money grab. It is destiny.
Always been the plan for Jake to fight Tank once Canelo didn't happen. And to Tank's credit, he's a real bad dude, and he's been calling out Jake. And people, it's funny how now they're saying size.
The talk surrounding Tank Davis versus Jake Paul is not just about a fight. It is about the very fabric of boxing. Mike Perry highlighted the weight discrepancy that seems absurd on paper, raising questions about fairness and competition. Nakisa by Darian countered that narrative by showing fans the truth. This fight has been building for years, with Tank Davis himself demanding it. That changes everything. Tank is not stepping in because of money alone. He is stepping in because he wants to prove that no YouTube star, no matter how big, can step into his world and survive. Jake Paul is not entering because he wants a payday. He is entering because he believes his size, his power, and his relentless grind in the gym can neutralize the greatness of a smaller man. This is David versus Goliath, except Goliath is the underdog. This is not a circus. This is a collision of willpower, ego, and destiny. In the end, the conclusion fans will be left with depends entirely on how the fight unfolds. If Tank Davis lands that one shot, boxing purists will rejoice, and Jake Paul will be humbled. If Jake Paul withstands Tank's assault and uses his size to impose his will, the sport will be forced to take him seriously in a way no one ever imagined. What Perry and Nakisa have done with their words is set the perfect storm. This fight is not just about who wins or loses. It is about legacy, pride, and the question every boxing fan cannot wait to see answered. Can Jake Paul survive Tank Davis, or will Tank's greatness erase the weight of the world?